How to master your fear of the future or stop worrying. Imagine how much more energy you could have if you weren't using it up on a silly mental exercise about what could possibly go wrong in the future, right? You're thinking of all the different possibilities. It's wearing you down. It's making you feel maybe burned out. The question is then, how can we stop this worrying process? How can we get out of that conundrum of constantly worrying and thinking about what possibly could go wrong? And I'm not using it like what could possibly go wrong. It's more like I'm very certain at the unconscious level something is going to go wrong. It's like, and Murphy's law kind of sums that up, right? And so then the question is then, how can we stop this process? What can we do about it? It's very important to understand how things become associated within our bodies. And when I say body, I mean body and brain. It's just one system. It's all interconnected. And in general, the brain is all about wanting to predict what's going to happen in the near future. And it's going to want to predict that very quickly. The conscious mind is actually quite slow and is very limited in terms of what it can process at any given moment of time. A lot of times we say that we can process 7 minus or plus 2 bits of information at a time, right? And so the brain is operating on a very narrow bandwidth, or the conscious mind is at least, of what we can take in. Now, unconsciously, we're taking in so much more information, and it's all being sorted out automatically. And that's where real change happens. Change is not necessarily about changing the environment. Of course, that can also be beneficial. The change is, what are you focusing on in your environment? Because that focus is going to determine what becomes triggered in terms of your actions and your behaviors. And now we're specifically talking about anticipating what could go wrong in the future and hopefully thinking of a solution. So that's one of the best ways to stop worrying, is to organize your worrying into one of 3 boxes: a worry that has a real solution, a worry that you can't really solve, and a worry that's irrational. Let's go through each of these ones. A real solution might be you don't have enough money, so you need to get some extra work somehow. And that would be a way of, of getting that worrying under control. If you're someone who's living in a country where you have limited work opportunities, you might want to try to get a better education and sacrifice a lot of what you're currently using money on in terms of bettering yourself and your situation. So if you're someone has bad habits, you're going to need to use the information in my videos in order to break out of those bad habits and really start creating the lifestyle that you want. Remember, this video is about people who want to be creators. And I'm defining that as a very broad term of people, of anyone who wants to create a better life for themselves, anyone who wants to make content that they can teach or show or entertain other people with and better other people's lives. The next step in terms of breaking worrying is being able to distinguish between, as I said earlier, a worry that is a real problem that you can really solve, and then you have worries that are outside of your control. There is no sense using a lot of time on things that you really can't influence or control. And that is really hard for a lot of people because we become very, very engaged. If you're driving in traffic and someone does something really stupid, at least from your point of view, uh, you might get really angry and upset about that. You might get a bill where you forgot to pay the bill on time, and you get really upset about that. You might be worried about something in the future where maybe you're worried about the safety of your child while they're riding their bicycle. And the only thing you can think about is, well, child has a helmet on and I've taught them the rules of the road, and they know what they're doing. It's outside of your control, a lot of things. If you're on an airplane, you can't influence whether the plane will land safely or not, but you can influence which airlines you fly on and make sure you're flying on with a what's it called? Reputable? Is that how it's pronounced? Airlines. Someone who has a good track record. S- s- Sorry about the pronunciation mispronunciation there. I live in Norway, you see. My native language is English, but I speak mostly Norwegian all through the day. So sometimes I want to say, instead of biological, I want to say biologisk or repeatable instead of oh, I can't even say it now. Sorry about that. Anyway, back to the main topic. You want to find an airlines that will has a good track record so that the probability is quite high that you're going to land. And I always say to people who have a fear of flying, a fear of filing, that would be an interesting fear to work with. A fear of flying is that in this instance, greed works. You might wonder what that means. Well, maybe I'll talk about that in another video if you really want to understand why greed works in this instance. And you just want to learn to stop focusing on what you don't have control over. The third category is our irrational feelings or irrational worries. And irrational worries are worries that are there because we are driven by a thought process which is incorrect or wrong. And so if we believe in conspiracy theories, if we think that something is just a hoax and it's not a hoax, uh, you might think you have everything under control because you have a MasterCard and can pay for your bills right now. However, what's going to happen in the future? That's an example of someone who's not worrying enough about their future. What you need to understand is that when we sort out our worries in these three categories, it can really help us start to master what's going on inside of ourselves so that we can either focus on the solution, we can focus on learning to accept that we can't do anything about it, or we can focus on the irrational thoughts and thinking that's driving the irrational worry. So that's one way of stopping worries. There's another thing you also need to learn about worrying, which is very important. And this is a very basic thing because, as I've said earlier, the brain is all about anticipating what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 minutes. And the way it does that is it takes shortcuts. It'll take a stimuli, which is neutral, and usually it can be also an external stimuli like a red light, a stoplight that you stop automatically for, right? Because if you had showed a baby a red stoplight, they're not going to necessarily just stop because they don't have any association with red stop, right? But we build up that association through repetition, just like we do that with the times tables. 3 times 2 is 6, 5 times 4 is 20, etc. And most of our language also is acquired through we repeat certain phrases. That's what a good large language model does, is it's actually just recognizing patterns that most people would talk about or go down that path, and it repeats it uh, in our ways. And then it's up to us to, like clay. So think of a large language model as like clay, where you can form the clay into any shape you want. Well, the clay has certain predictive properties in terms of if you're gonna do pottery and it's gonna act in a certain way, or if you're going to put together in a certain way. And you can think of ChatGPT as a way of making words more like clay. You prompt it, it says something you want. It doesn't quite exactly express what you're trying to express. So then you clarify it again and you gradually focus it into those areas, which is explaining a concept or idea that you really want to explain. That's another way of thinking about large language models. Words are clay, and you're forming the clay into a coherent narrative for someone else to either learn, be entertained about, or just, you know, to satisfy some sort of curiosity itch you might have. Anyway, back to the main topic of worrying. And what happens is that we have these sensations within our body, and they are, in general, sensations about where in space our body is. Like I can feel that my hands as I tense them, I can feel the muscles as I tighten them, I can feel my stomach if I pay attention to that. So I know what's going on inside my body at any moment in time. I can become aware of that. And that awareness is often outside of consciousness until maybe you step on a nail or something hurts you or you scratch yourself and you get pain, right? And then you pay attention to that part. Oh, my thigh is hurting, or my whatever it is, my tooth is hurting. And you weren't paying attention to that a moment ago. And then something triggered it and you became conscious of it. And and a worry is kind of like that. It can start off, you can start off with have something you genuinely are worried about. And then that worried about becomes associated with a general sensation in the body. And that general sensation in the body just might be what it feels like to breathe, right? So you're not really thinking about it, but you're just breathing. And as you breathe, you start to worry, and then those two become connected. And then the worry increases the arousal. So then you start paying attention. Oh my goodness, I'm starting to breathe more heavily. Oh, what if I have a panic attack? Or what if what I'm imagining is going to happen really does happen? Like the airplane falls out of the sky or my child crashes on the bicycle. And and then it becomes a living hell because the worry becomes an anxiety and it just takes off and you don't know exactly what to do about what's going on inside you. It's very, very painful when this happens. And what you need to do is you need to somehow reprocess that worry because we're going to call this two types of worrying. The kind of worrying where there is a real worry, where there's a real solution. And we're going to call that a solution worry, where there's a real solution. However, a lot of our worries will be driven more about things we can't control or irrational worries. And those become connected to a sensation in the body. And also the real worry can also become connected to a sensation in the body. And we're going to call, when it's driven more by a sensation in the body, a neuroplastic worry. In other words, the brain is misinterpreting the sensations in the body as something to worry about. And then you will start looking for something to worry about, which wasn't there from before. And then you'll find something. There's always something you can be concerned about what might be happening in the future. And we're going to call this a neuroplastic worry. And the other type of worry where there's a genuine worry, that's because there's something in the future coming up where you have control and you need to deal with it in some way. Or there's something coming up in the future which is irrational, and then you have to deal with the irrational thoughts that's driving it. Or there's something coming up where you don't really have too much control over the outcome, what's going to happen. And then you need to refocus on what you do have control over. Okay, so the difference between a genuine worry is that it's not triggered by a sensation in the body. It's triggered by either a real worry, a worry about something you can't control, or a irrational worry. And we've already talked about how to deal with those. However, if you get a worry that's triggered more by sensations in your body, because the sensations in your body have become connected to or associated with the genuine worry, then suddenly you start looking for something to worry about. You weren't worrying about anything in specific ahead of time. You just started to feel worried about something and you don't know what it is. And then your mind starts searching for something and you find it. And we're going to call that, as I said earlier, a neuroplastic worry. I'm sorry I'm repeating myself so much, but it's partially because I'm trying to explain something that's a little bit difficult to explain, and also because pedagogically, if we repeat, you'll remember it better. Okay, so what are we going to do with neuroplastic worry if it's not a worry that's you really have to be worried about? Well, you first need to realize, does the worry come and go? Because if it's a neuroplastic worry, if you forget it for a few minutes or you forget to follow through on it, then it's not really something you have to concern yourself about, is it? Because it's not something that has real consequences in the world somehow. So the whole idea then is to be able to understand and reprocess the information going into the brain, so or reprogramming the brain so it's not associating the neutral stimuli with the stimuli that was causing the real worry or the genuine worry, which has now become a neuroplastic worry. I'm sure you must find this very confusing. I'm really trying to explain it, and I really apologize ahead of time if it's not that clear, but it is important. So I'm going to continue pushing through. Uh, and what you do is you become mindful of the sensations going on inside your body. So you can learn to distinguish between sensations that are neutral in nature, they are not, or sensations that are not actually connected to the worry, and just allowing yourself to feel a sense of calmness about that. Now, calmness is not the goal of being mindful. It's a consequence of being mindful. Because what happens in a worry that's driven by more the sensations, and the worry causes an arousal, a fear response, and that fear then gives your worrying more fuel, and it it spirals out of control. In order to break that spiraling, you need to allow yourself to just be in the moment, accepting what's going on. And acceptance doesn't mean you're saying it's okay. You're just saying this is what's happening at the moment. Then what happens is when you stop giving fuel to the fire of stress and worrying, it dissipates all by itself. You become calm all by yourself. You can add certain techniques like talking to yourself gently, having an internal dialogue. This is going to be okay. No matter what happens, it's all going to work out. And that ability to calm the nervous system down, either through being mindful or giving yourself a, some sort of message to calm yourself down, is extremely important and helpful in teaching the brain to reprocess the information coming into it so that your worry is not being amplified in a negative way. And this is what we're talking about, because sometimes you can have a genuine worry, but it takes too much time. You know what the solution is, right? And that means suddenly it's gone from a genuine worry to a neuroplastic worry, where your body is interpreting the sensations from the body incorrectly, and it is fueling this negative process of worrying about something you can do something about, or it's fueling the process of you not being able to let go of of something that you don't have any control over. It's fueling the process of being stuck in an irrational worry, even though you know it's irrational. And that's the power of learning to just be in the moment, and either learning to calm down the nervous system so you can think clearly, or through mindfulness, accepting that this is the way it is at this current moment in time, and then it will gradually dissipate all on its own. Remember, the change process starts with you first take a decision. I'm going to change this, or I'm going to not let my worries compound over time and ruin the quality of my life. The next part is through trial and error. In other words, you take the decision and you test something out. And usually when we're testing something out, we're going to want to try to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. Our conscious mind is not really that good at changing something in the present moment, because by the time we become conscious of something, the unconscious processes have already started the train. The train has left the platform by the time we become aware that the train is taking off. And then we have to really run hard. And a train is really hard to stop once it starts going. It's a huge locomotive, which has lots of tons of, of momentum behind it. And this is actually true for anything that's going on inside of us. Anytime a decision is taken, it's outside of your conscious awareness, and that train has left the platform and your conscious mind ends up running after it. That's why it's so hard to stop doing something that's bad for you, because by the time you decide you want to stop, your mind has already decided to start. That's why being ahead of yourself, being able to anticipate when something's going to happen ahead of time, and then reprogramming the mind to deal with that situation is extremely helpful. And here we're talking about reprogramming these sensations that's triggering a worry cycle, where you're getting stuck in this vicious cycle of worrying, fear, worrying more, fear, and not being able to get out of the worry. And when you anticipate when it's going to happen in the future, like for instance, for a lot of people, delivering your taxes on time, a lot of people might start worrying about that. Or you have an exam coming up, you might start worrying about that. Or you're worried about you're not going to be able to pay the bills, you might start worrying about that. All these different worries are things you need to deal with. But if you become overwhelmed by the fear of not being able to do it, you might be someone who puts the bills into the drawer, or you don't do the actions you need to in order to at least have some sort of controlled crash landing, right? Sometimes we do have to crash land. Sometimes we're not able to create something in our life the way we wanted it to go. And that means we have to somehow land we have to somehow reach a satisfactory way of dealing with all these difficult things that can happen in our lives without becoming overwhelmed by them. Does this make sense? I hope it does. Anyway, you've then made a decision, you go through a learning paradigm, and if there's something that's blocking you at the unconscious level, maybe there's some sort of trauma going on, you'll need to find a therapist to help you work through that. But let's say there isn't. So you're going through trial and error and you try again and again and again. Always focus on your success, even if it's only one little fraction of a success, because success will beget success. So the more you become successful, the more success you will get. And always, always focus on your success. And that success will grow and compound over time. And that's why I encourage people to always focus on what's going on, which is driving them into the right direction. Okay. Well, I think we've kind of we can wrap it up now. Thanks for following along. Hit the like button, all that good stuff. And remember, this channel is all about you.